Working with layer groups. In this tutorial, we shall learn about layer groups and how we can work with them. When we work with a lot of layers, the layer panel can get crowded and a bit overwhelming. So it's better to organize it, and grouping our layers is one of the ways to do it. Let's begin by going to Bridge for one moment and open up Logo by double-clicking on it. This document has two layers in it, as we can see, and in fact, they are both shape layers. Even though the top layer looks very much like a text layer, it's in fact not. It is so because we didn't want to use a text layer because we were not sure if we were going to get the same fonts installed as in here. Thus, we converted the text into a shape. We have here two different shape layers making up this logo. All we have to do to organize these layers into a group is select both of the layers and click on the new group icon at the bottom of the layers panel. Once a new group is formed, it can be collapsed or expanded by clicking on this disclosure triangle we see here. We can also rename the group to Logo and then tap Enter to apply that. Now we'll want to combine these two documents together. So under the window menu, we'll choose Arrange and then Tile. Now that we can see them both, instead of dragging and dropping each of the layers individually, we can click and drag and drop the logo into the oranges image. We now no longer need the logo.psd file open, so we'll close that. We don't need to save changes. And now let's reposition this logo. It's quite easy to do that because these layers are in a group, and when layers are in a group, all the layers act as one unit. That means that if we select a group, then the layers are selected, and if that means we move all the layers within the group, and it's the same if we transform the group or scale the group. If we want to transform these, we can use Edit and then Transform and then Scale. We'll hold down the Alt and the Shift key, and that will allow us to transform from the center and maintain the proportions. Then we'll reposition it down a little bit and click Enter. If we wish to change the opacity of an individual layer, we can simply select that layer. For instance, the Organic Harvest text. We can change the opacity through different ways. We can click on the word opacity on the layers panel and drag to the left or to the right with the help of our scrubby slider to decrease or increase opacity. Or we can enter in a specific number like typing 50. Or we can click the downward pointing arrow and use the slider here to change the opacity. We'll click Enter to apply that. Another way to do that is through the Move tool. Since in the options bar, there are no options for transparency for the Move tool, we can just simply type in a number to apply that % of opacity. So if we type in the number 7, we get 70%. If we type in the number 4, we get 40%. If we type quickly, we could tap 45 and get 45%. Or if we want to go back to 100%, I could type in 0. If we want to and set it to 0%, basically hiding the layer, we can tap 00. Fine, let us set it to 100% by just tapping the 0 key. And if we wanted to change the opacity of all the layers, we click on the layer group. Now if we tap 8, for example, it changes the opacity for all the layers inside that group. Let's go ahead and change that back to 0 to get 100% opacity. Another thing to keep in mind is that if we have a painting tool like the brush tool selected instead of the Move tool and type in a number, say 5, it's going to change the opacity for the brush to 50%, not the opacity of the layers panel. We'll tap 0 in order to set that back. So we just need to remember to have the Move tool selected or any other tool selected, which does not have an opacity setting in its option bar when we are changing the opacity of the layers. Alright, let us put all 4 of the small photos in their own group. So we'll select them all by clicking on the first one, then holding down the Shift key and selecting the last layer. This time, we are going to use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+G to place them in a group. We'll expand the collapsed group to see its contents. We can just click and drag to move a layer to either change the stacking order or to completely remove the layer from the group if we want to. If we drag up and release the cursor right now, it would actually drop the strawberries layer into the logo group. We are going to drag up a little bit further until we see just a solid horizontal line there. That tells us that it's not going to place that layer within the group. So we'll release our cursor and voila! The strawberries.jpg file is released from its group. If we want to put the layer back in, all we need to do is drag and drop it within that group. We can even place a group inside of another group. Now if we wanted to put group 1 inside of the logo group, I could drag group 1 on top of the logo group. This time we see a full rectangle around the logo, which tells us that it's going to drop group 1 inside of the logo group. And there we go. And we can tell that it's nested because it's been indented. And if we want to remove that from the group, we'll have to click and drag up to the top again until we see that just solid horizontal line and release our cursor. Now we'll go ahead and rename group 1 here to small photos. Tap enter to apply that. It's kind of time consuming to name all the layers and layer groups, but it's very helpful if we are in a more collaborative environment and need to send our files to someone else. It's easier with the names on than without. Even for ourselves, it can be useful to have our layers and layer groups named if we ever were to go back to the document to make changes. We'll choose File and then Save As and go ahead and change this to oranges_02. We need to ensure that we save it in the same folder and the Photoshop document with layers and click Save.